Association is a professional non-profit body affiliated to All India Management Association with the aim to promote scientific management in industry and trade. It also undertakes training and consultancy to improve managerial effectiveness and competitiveness of its members. Merit Management Association, formed in 1966, is registered under the Societies Registration Act 1860. The founder members of the association were Sri K.N. Mohan, Managing Director, Mohan Meekins Breweries, Sri Sultan Singh Jain, Managing Director, Saru Smelting, and Sri R. Sahi, General Manager, Dorala Sugar Works.
Beginning with the second session of the day, we have Mr. Abhinav Rastogi, promoter of PS Green Gas, Meerut. He would be talking about how green gas can be produced by collecting waste from sugar factories. The session chairman is Shri SPS Jaggi ji. He is also a council member of Meerut Management Association. He would be chairing the fourth session. Over to you.
Good morning, all of you. So now,
I would just make a small clarification. It is Mr. SPS Jaggi ji who is talking from Mr. Vibhor Agarwal's ID. Thank you.
so good morning, all of you. You are very kind enough to listening all this recycling management system. Now present we are having Abhinav Rastogi. He is a science graduate from MS Ramaiah College of Engineering, Bangalore. And he has worked in Wipro Technologies also for a couple of years, where he was awarded Feather of Cap by the industrialist and CEO of the Wipro Technologies, Mr. Azim Premji. In spite of all this, Abhinav is also have got a passion for the tutoring. He is starting a company for the kids in US and UK before joining his family business. Presently, he is working with to generate CNG for the vehicles from the unwanted waste material. This is a project approved by the UP state and awarded by Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath also in Uttar Pradesh. That project is likely to be launched in January 21. So I welcome Abhinav Rastogi on this platform of Meerut Management Association. You are welcome to please give your ideas for this life recycle management. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaggi ji. Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you, Bhargav ji, for giving us an insight on why and how to recycle the e-waste. So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So, I am Abhinav Rastogi from PS Green Gas. And I thank all the members present and thanks for giving me a platform to speak about my new venture. We are venturing in something which is actually a need of an hour, that is looking for an alternate energy resources, because we know that all the fossil fuels are getting depleted day by day. So the renewable energy is the need of an hour, which we actually need to look at. So MS Green Gas will be converting the waste material like cow dung, the poultry waste, the press mud from the sugar industry, the food waste, the mandi waste into the CNG. In this, we can refer to as the bio-CNG also, because it's been done biologically. It's not from the core of the earth, so it is done biologically. So that is why it's called bio-CNG, and it is same as CNG. And we'll be making biofertilizer out of it. So this is all done by the decomposition of the organic waste. So let me just share the screen. One second.
Abhinav, do you want us to share your screen or are you able to do it?
No, I'll be able to do it, I guess. Let me just figure it out in case if am I able to do it now?
Yes.
One second. So first of all, I would like to tell you what exactly the biogas is. Biogas is nothing but a gobar gas, what we have heard earlier. I mean, we have seen in the villages, people use cow dung to make gas out of it and they use it as a fuel. So this will be doing this entire process in a much commercial manner, and we'll be enriching the biogas so that we can make CNG out of it, and uh, the CNG and the biofertilizer out of it. So biogas is nothing. It's just a mixture of a few combustible gases like methane and oxygen, and it has a few inert gases which are like carbon dioxide, H2S, which are the unwanted gases. So we have to enrich the biogas to make it as an industrial and for the vehicle use. So there are two ways of decomposing an organic waste. So that is in the presence of oxygen or in the absence of oxygen. So we'll be primarily discussing about in the absence of oxygen, that is anaerobic digestion. So the bacteria which gets involved in the digestion are called mesophilic bacteria. So this is a little technical. So let's discuss it later. So first of all, we'll discuss about the biogas production. Then after that, we'll discuss about the purification and the enrichment for the industrial and the vehicle use so that we can use it as the CNG for our vehicles. What exactly the biogas is? Biogas is nothing but when the organic material, whatever the organic material is, it has a life for the decomposition. When it gets decomposed, it gives us a gas. Those bacteria actually eat up the surface of the organic material and they start burping. So that burp is nothing but a biogas which comes out of it. And it itself is an exothermic reaction. It is a clean, efficient source of renewable energy. So because everything is being taken, all the unwanted material like the cow dung, the press mud, the mandi waste, everything from the municipal waste. So everything has been collected and organic material is segregated and the inorganic material is segregated. So where we put that organic material in a huge digester. So that is like the heart of the entire system. So what is this? What is the biogas? Clean, efficient source of renewable energy. It is very much renewable, so that we know that there are so many depleting oil resources, and the need of an hour is nothing but a renewable energy source. Like it could be solar, it could be wind, it could be the gas from the landfills, that is a biogas. So it is made from the organic waste, and it produces mainly methane, which is the most combustible gas and has a calorific value of around 50,000 kilojoules. The process, how it goes, because I discussed that we'll be discussing about the digestion which takes in the absence of oxygen. So it has to be an airtight container where the digestion takes place. We'll discuss that digestion part little later. And what it replaces all the non-renewable energy resources like the diesel, the petrols. It is equally good as the diesel, petrol, and your coal or your any other resources. As I told you earlier, the digestion has to be done in an airtight container. It replaces fossil fuels and the source of non-renewable energy. So we have to come over all the diesels and the petrols and the coal so that we can have less emission of the greenhouse gases. The greenhouse gases emission when we burn a CNG is far less compared to when we are burning the petrol or burning the diesel or burning the LPG for that instance. It is simple and the most cleaner gas available right now. The 0.09 for carbon monoxide is given only 0.09 grams per milligrams per kg. So that is really less. So it doesn't add up to the greenhouse gases at all, and it is highly available in the core of Earth as a natural gas. And we have so much of waste available in and around ourselves, so that we can get it collected and make it into a energy resource. The another byproduct which we get out of this is a biofertilizer. So when these organic products are digested, so there is a residue left which gives you nothing but an organic manure, purely organic manure, which helps your soils to enrich, and which gives a better yield, which gives a cleaner vegetables, which gives the cleaner soil, healthier soil, and doesn't let any pollution take place. So manure, we get the solid manure out of it and the liquid manure out of it as a byproduct. When the liquid manure comes out, it is thrown into a solid liquid separator, which separates the solid part, which is a purely organic fertilizer, and the liquid part is nothing but a liquid manure. You can use it in the field instead of water. You can use it in the field, and most of it is recycled into the digester again. So we are not wasting too much of water, also fresh water also. And the biogas decreases greenhouse gases and emissions. So it doesn't give too much of carbon monoxide and the other harmful gases, and it produces the organic fertilizer, which is the best part, and it reduces the pollution. How does it work? So the bottom of the slide, you can see a small container which has a lid on it. So that is nothing but a digester. This is a small size digester, and we have covered it so that the oxygen doesn't go in. We feed the feedstock, that is the organic material, into a feeding pit, and there are few agitators in it. Those agitators will actually churn it and make it into a slurry mixed it with water, and that is pushed into the airtight digesters, so that the anaerobic decomposition of the material can take place inside the digester. Inside the digesters, there are already built up colonies of bacteria, the mesophilic bacteria, which can actually help in the decomposition of those organic products. So every organic product has a certain time for its decomposition, that is called hydraulic retention time, HRT. So in our case, we'll be using press mud as primarily press mud and the cow dung as the organic product as a feedstock. So the HRT is around 40 days. So in 40 days, the entire thing which goes in on the first day can be decomposed, can be eaten up, can be digested by the bacteria by the 40th day. So we have to design our digesters in such a way so that these things get fine, and we get maximum methane out of it, maximum biogas out of it. So and we have to take care of a few important aspects in this. The pH value of the slurry which goes inside the digester has to be kept at a level of around 7. That is purely neutral. From 6.8 to 7.2 it may vary, but it has to be kept primarily in such a condition so that this is the most healthiest food for the bacteria inside. And the methane is created and collected in a rooftop chamber, like in this digester you can see, or in the slide on the right hand side you can see that this is a plastic balloon type of thing, so that the air doesn't go in. On the top of it, it gets collected, and there is an effluent produced after the production of the biogas, so that we are putting in the manure inside the digesters every day at least 4 times. So equally amount has to come out. So the amount the thing which comes out of the digester is nothing but an effluent that has a TS of around, total solids of around 16%, and that is run through solid liquid separator, so that the solids get separated and gives us a pure organic fertilizer, and then the liquid gets recycled again, and otherwise it can be sold also to the farmers. It can be given to the farmers to make them enrich their soil. So this is how the thing works. So first of all, we put all the water, excrete, all the slurry inside the digester, and anything which is biodegradable can be put inside a digester. It has a certain time. We need to calculate the time, how much time does it take to get digested. So then the anaerobic environment. In the anaerobic environment, in the sense, it's a digester. It is covered from the top. It's a concrete cylinder, basically. It's a concrete cylinder which is covered from the top. It has a non-permeable membrane on the top of it, so that the gas collected at the top can be taken out through a pump or through an exhaust. So the processes which actually takes place in the anaerobic environment are hydrolysis. I won't go into detail. It is just nothing but fragmented of the organic fertilizer or organic material into smaller parts. Then the fermentation takes place. Then the acetogenesis, dehydrogenation, and the methogenesis. Methogenesis is nothing but the last part in which the methane is involved. Methane is evolved from the bacteria. Whatever the bacteria eats up, when it burps, the methane gets collected at the top of the chamber, and you have to keep churning it. So keep churning the manure inside the digester, so that there is no scum formation on top of the digester. If there is any scum formation on top of the digester, then the bacteria won't be won't be healthier and won't be able to eat properly and won't be able to give you the more of the biogas in it. So those few things which have to be taken, those considerations have to be taken care of. So after that, we get a biogas. I mean, that is collected on the top of the digester. Biogas has nothing but methane in it. The carbon dioxide, the methane is approximately around 50 to 55%, and the carbon dioxide is a large chunk, so that is around 30 to 25 to 30%. Then all the other gases like O2, H2S, and ammonia. H2S is the most dangerous gas of these all because it is most corrosive in nature. If you have to transfer the biogas or the CNG from one place to another, it has to be transferred in a steel pipeline. And if there is any traces of H2S available in the biogas or in the CNG, so that can corrode the entire pipeline, and that could be really harmful. So these things have to be taken out during the purification system so that we can get the pure maximum, the standard methane out of it, and which can be used for the vehicular purpose also. And the water which comes out of the slurry, which comes out of the digester, is nothing but it has 80 to 90% less pathogens in it. No harmful bacteria in it. And these bacteria, whenever they come into the presence of oxygen, they eventually die. So this has 80 to 90% less contaminants, and it is purely an organic fertilizer, which so these are the technical requirements for a biodigester. What exactly do we have to take care of? As I told you earlier, the pH value has to be maintained between 6.8 to 7.2 so that it is a healthier environment for the bacteria to survive, and so that the bacteria can work in a more efficient way. The temperature is all these bacteria rely on a very certain temperature. They are most active on a temperature range of 35 to 38. So we have to maintain a temperature of 35 to 38 degrees inside the digester, and we do it by having the coils inside, and because it itself is an exothermic reaction. So the temperature is a little bit more maintained, and we keep it insulated from the outside as well. And I told you about the time which has to be taken care of. That is nothing but the hydraulic retention time. Hydraulic retention time is the time which is needed for a material to get decomposed. And a waste to water also has to be maintained. I mean, the certain amount of waste has to be mixed. The slurry cannot have a TS of around 70% so that it's more of a solid inside, the total solids inside, so that the bacteria can't eat it. So the TS has to be maintained, the total solid thing has to be maintained at around 15 to 17% inside the digester when we are mixing the waste to water. And because the manure, the slurry which comes out of the digester is nothing but an organic fertilizer. So the organic fertilizer has a very good ratio component of carbon to nitrogen. So your feeding stock should be such it is neither too carbon rich nor too nitrogen rich. So carbon to nitrogen ratio has to be maintained. What we are feeding in the digester, that the byproduct of it that comes out. So the ratio of the carbon to nitrogen has to be maintained inside the digester so that we can get a valuable organic fertilizer and the organic liquid manure out of it. Different products, when eaten by a bacteria, gives a different amount of biogas. The things which are eaten by the bacteria is nothing but a biomass. So let's say if the cow dung gives us around 100% of the gas, then the food processing waste gives around 600 to 6 times to 9 times higher biogas generated from the same amount of waste as the same amount of cow dung. So there are a few things which are, but these wastes are not easily available for the economic viability. So this has to be taken care of. We have to take care of the wastes which are easily available in nature and which are abundantly available in your nearby areas, and you can make some economics out of it. So those things have to be taken care of. We won't get too much of a food waste. I mean, we won't get tons of food waste daily unless we start collecting from all the resources, which is economically and commercially may not be viable. But what viable things are like collection of the poultry waste, which is like on the daily basis, from the Gaushala waste or from the sugar industry, which runs probably like 7 months in a year. So these wastes are abundantly available and they have to be actually taken care of. They make too much of a landfill. So this biomass is should be considered appropriately so that we can get a decent amount of biogas out of it. So now we were talking about the effluent. The effluent which comes out of the digester is nothing but an organic fertilizer. It is almost pathogen free, no bacteria, no harmful bacteria, no unwanted material are there in it. And we can separate this effluent, I mean the solid and the liquid in it, so by 3-4 ways, like sedimentation. But sedimentation is a process which can only take place for a smaller quantity of a liquid. If you talk about a lakh liter of liquid, the sedimentation gonna take too much of time, and the amount of water collected daily will be like too much. The filtration, but the other thing is passing it through the solid liquid fertilizer, which we haven't mentioned here. So now, is the biogas model successful? This is one of its first kind in the entire UP, and it got awarded by Mr. Yogi Adityanath also last year. And I've gave a couple of presentations in the MNRE also, which is the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy Resources, and this project actually got approved from the UP NEDA also. I gave a couple of presentations in the UP NEDA also. UP NEDA is nothing but a department of Uttar Pradesh which deals with additional resources of energy. And this entire program comes under SATAT scheme, which is run by a central government. SATAT scheme is nothing but sustainable alternative towards affordable transportation, which I mean we can, because of the depleting nature of the fossil fuel, we can have the renewable energy. So that is why the SATAT scheme has come into play, and it started in around 2018. This SATAT scheme came into play. So is this successful model? See, gobar gas is nothing very new to the Indian industry. It's just that we haven't commercialized this properly. But this is a very popular industry in Germany, in Sweden. It's been 25 years since it's been there, and they've been running trains on it. They've been running all their trains, the cars, the so many things they've been running, and so many industries have been using CNG to run all these things. So Middle East have been quite successful in doing all these things. And what my recommendation is, because biogas is a big yes, because it's carbon neutral and it is renewable fuel. It doesn't increase in the atmospheric greenhouse gases at all. It's a very minute quantity which it emits. I mean, the carbon monoxide is emitted. The considerations during the making of this entire biogas plant has to be such. I mean, you have to take care of the HRT, the hydraulic retention time, the construction cost, the fuel source. The fuel source is very important. This fuel source is nothing but a raw material source. You should know from where to procure your raw material daily. For me, it is around 150 tons of raw material which I need daily for my kind of capacity, or for my kind of CNG plant I'm looking for. I'll be producing around 14,000 cubic meter of biogas daily, which after purification amounts to around 5,600 kgs of CNG. And the temperature and the pH monitoring is a very important aspect of it. So this has to be taken care of. And there is slurry management which you should take care, because there is around 50,000 liter of liquid which comes out of the digester daily. So some part of it goes into the digester again, but some part has to be at the disposal. Now we talk about the biogas enrichment process. So biogas is nothing but 50 to 55% is around methane, and the rest is CO2. There are traces of water vapor, there are traces of H2S. So these things have to eliminate it before we can use it for the vehicular and the industrial uses, so that we can increase the calorific value, so that you can run all your DGs and the generator sets, all your boilers, all your cars, all your other equipments which require a high calorific value. So we need to purify this biogas to make the better gas out of it, to methane rich gas. So there are few things and how what a gas heater needs, or how much a vehicle needs, how much a gas grid needs. So we can give this gas to the gas grid also. We can use this gas to run the generator sets also before the purification is started. Before the purification, the calorific value of a biogas is around 20,000 kilojoules, and after the purification is done, it becomes 50,000 joules. So we need to enrich the biogas so that we can have a better calorific value fuel out of it. The purification is done by in few processes: adsorption, that is scrubbing. In the scrubbing, we use too much of water, so there is too much of water wastage. But this is economical, very feasible, but the water is contaminated because it gets the H2S gets involved in it. H2S gets absorbed in it. So to dispose that lakh liter, probably 2.5 lakh liter of water daily, if you use this method, it's going to be a troublesome problem. The most commercially viable process is the pressure swing adsorption, the PSA technique, which is nothing new, but it's been there for ages now. The cryogenics, the gas membranes are another methods to remove all the impurities. But what we are using is the PSA technique because this is the most economically and the less harmful, and which doesn't lead to any kind of pollution in it. So first of all, we'll remove the carbon dioxide, which is the inert gas, doesn't help us in burning, so that we can increase the calorific value of the gas. And we can make it has to be, see, when you are burning a gas, it has to be consistent in nature. I mean, consistent in the sense there are few standards in the market, like in the biogas, in the CNG, the methane content has to be around 96%, and 2 to 3% it could be carbon dioxide. 1% of traces could be of oxygen, the nitrogen, or the inert gas, or the water vapor. So this carbon dioxide can also be removed by adsorption technique, pressure swing adsorption, and the same things. So as I told you earlier, the adsorption, the water scrubbing technology is nothing but passing your entire gas through a water chamber, and that water chamber has to be changed again and again because it keeps at a certain pressure, it absorbs the H2S and CO2 involved in it, and it becomes solvent in water. So the disposal of that water becomes a problem. So that is why we don't use too much of this technique. And the pressure and temperature and the pH of water gets really disturbed. The pH becomes a little more acidic in nature because the H2S gets involved in it. The pressure swing adsorption is nothing but the process of adsorption and desorption, which is carried out at higher pressure and the lower pressure. It's just the two chambers in it, one in which the absorption takes place, one the adsorption or the desorption takes place. I won't go into the detail, but these are simple designs to operate. I'll show in the next slides how exactly they look like. The cryogenic separation we are not using, so we are not really getting into it. It is another process of removing CO2 by cooling all the biogas. The cooling itself takes too much of energy, so that is why we don't use the cryogenic separation. And in terms of the economic valuation, the economics of this, the PS is like 100. The water scrubbing is like more efficient. I mean, more cost effective, but because of too much of contamination in water, we are not using this. The larger systems use actually in US, in Germany and the other places like Sweden, they primarily use the PSA technique to remove all the impurities from these kind of gases. It has to, how to remove the traces of water when the gases pass through the aluminum dioxide. So it leaves all its traces of water vapor, and the water vapor is removed. And the removal of H2S, the removal of H2S is very important. So when the gases pass through activated carbon, there is something called an activated carbon. When the gases pass through the activated carbon really absorbs all those H2S involved in it. But there are still few traces of H2S left after this process of passing it through the activated carbon is done. So we'll remove the another traces in the next purified section. So that is nothing but the absorption takes place through molecular sieves. Basically, molecular sieves are nothing but small crystals which has holes in it. When the gases pass through it, CO2 and the nitrogen and the H2S and the water molecules actually gets involved in it. Those sieve sizes are according to the sizes of the molecular size of carbon dioxide, the nitrogen, and the H2S. So this is a little too technical side. So This adsorption and desorption process generally takes in the depressurizing conditions. I mean, the one is with the pressure and one is without the pressure. The PSS systems produce the purified methane enriched gas continuously by repeating above adsorption and region. This is how a molecular sieves look like. From the left, the CH4, the biogas comes in, and when it touches the sieve, all the CO2 and the H2S molecules get trapped inside, and what comes out is primarily the methane, but there are little, probably a couple of percentages of CO2 is also there. You can't just pure it to 100% gas. This is how a PSS system, the purification system looks like. On the left, the biogas goes in. The coarse removal of H2S, in the sense if the gases pass through the activated carbon, the 90% of the H2S is removed over here before it enters into the chambers of PSS system. Then after the PSS system is after the pressure swing adsorption is done, what we get is we get a CO2 in one end. We can actually trap CO2 also for making the carbonized drink, but we generally do not. I mean, we won't be doing that. We will be flaring the carbon dioxide in the air. We'll be just collecting the methane out of it. So I'll tell you the difference between an LPG and a CNG is primarily is LPG can be only compressed to a pressure of around 7.5 bar, which is not much. So that because you cannot compress it to a higher pressure, you can't transport the gas to a longer distance. The first advantage of CNG over LPG is it can be transported to a longer distances because you can compress it at around 250 bars, and it is lighter than LPG, lighter than air. The CNG is lighter than air. So whenever there is a leakage, the CNG can flare up in the air. There is no, the explosion is going to be bare minimum. But in case of an LPG, because LPG is heavier than air, it settles, it is more denser, it settles at the bottom of the surface. In case of any explosion, it's a big boom, it's a big explosion. So these are the advantages, few advantages of the CNG over LPG. First is the distance. I mean the distance with which it can travel, because you can compress it to a large distances, and it is lighter than air. At the last of the slide, you can see you can compress the CNG at around 250 bar, and it can be stored in. You would have seen those cylinders on the CNG station which are kept at the rooftop. So those are nothing but the cylinders. In those cylinders, the CNG is actually filled up. The biogas is purified. It is used for the various applications, replaces fossil fuels, including the vehicular fuels. So as we have discussed earlier, purification is definitely required for transportation, storage, and vehicular use. When the gas is compressed, I mean, 250 bar is nothing but when you compress a gas to 250 bar, the volume decreases by 250 times. So you can store it in a cylinder and carry it to a longer distance, and it becomes more commercially viable. So you can transport it to a longer distances. Various purification methods have been discussed. So primarily we use the PSA technique. It's PSA systems are a unique advantage, simultaneous removal of the various impurities. And I'll show you few of the projects which are in different parts of the country, which are on a smaller scale, but they are still producing the gas out of it. This is nothing but how a digester looks like. This is a concrete structure, and on top of it, it's a non-permeable membrane, which comes primarily from Germany. So it's a really thick surface. The gas gets evolved and it gets collected on the top of the surface, top of this digester, and you can take the gas out from this digester by a compressor or by an exhaust. So this is how it looks like. On the left hand side, you can see a purification unit, and this is how a small digester look like. And there are two small feeding pits. You can see that there are two pipes going inside those pits. Those two pits are nothing but, I'll show you. This is how the feeding looks like. It's a big concrete feeding pit in which you dump all your organic material in it, and you mix it with water. And with the help of these pipelines, it is, because there is so much of pressure inside the digester, there are compressors which actually pushes the slurry from this pit inside the digester. And this is on the top of the slide, you can see these organic fertilizer is getting collected. This is nothing but a purification unit, and you can fill these cylinders with a CNG. After the compression, you can fill these cylinders. I guess that's an end of it. If anybody wants to ask me any question regarding these, I haven't covered the government part in it, what government is talking about these projects, because that is easily accessible to anyone. So thank you, and over and out to you, Ankur, please.
People who have questions to ask can send them to Mr. Ankit Singhal on his private chat, and soon after the session is over, the session 2 is over, we would be beginning with the panel discussion, and wherein Mr. Bhargav and Mr. Rastogi would be available to answer the questions. Mr. Jaggi.
Thank you very much, Abhinav Rastogi ji. We are very much thankful for the talk you have delivered to us. It's very informative to us. And the way you presented this, that how this by cow dung and the waste material, organic waste material available in every house, at every house, it can be collected and transformed into a gas, which is a very nice, effective, and you have presented it in a very effective way to make it very easy to understand this. So I'm very much thankful for you. Thank you very much.
Welcome, sir.
I would now request Mr. Jaggi to please present a token of appreciation to Mr. Abhinav Rastogi.
This is a token of affection from the Meerut Management Association for all the members to Mr. Abhinav Rastogi to be part of this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would also like to thank the Saru Group for sponsoring the session. So this brings us to the end of the 4 sessions that we had, 2 yesterday and 2 we had today. I would now invite Mr. Ankit Singhal, former President, Meerut Management Association, to take up with the panel discussion, please. Ankit.
Thank you, Ankur. I am really excited to be the moderator for our panel discussion today with Mr. Sandeep Bhargav and Mr. Abhinav Rastogi. First of all, thank you. Thank you so much, Sandeep ji and Abhinav ji, for sparing your valuable time and coming here to our convention and sharing your interesting journeys and products and services that you are offering to save the planet. Over the last few hours, I have been collecting a few questions from our audience, and now I think it's the time to actually throw these questions at you and get some responses for our people. So, सबसे पहला, everyone is interested in the commercial aspects of these things. So, Sandeep ji, what are the incentives for average, e-waste producer like me and you, who have our old cell phones and old laptops and old monitors that they want to give to you for recycling? Do we get any incentives? Do we get any cashbacks or money backs or things like that?
So let me tell you, there are no kickbacks, no cashbacks, but we all are contributing towards the building of the nation. That is very important. But certainly, yes, for any kg of weight, the material is deposited. We pay by kgs actually. So it goes. The ultimate goal is to make the environment sustainable. That's the prime aim. But in India, it's very difficult. If you don't pay anybody, nothing will come out of the place. So don't expect very big incentives, but the clear incentive is your contribution. And we do have programs for the collection agents, for the aggregators to get paid in terms of some incentives in terms of what they've collected. So it goes by per kilo basis. And if there is an interest, I can share the rates separately, because it differs on volumes and the kind of work they happen, the location from where the waste comes. So it all depends on that. But more or less, yes, they are compensated for the kind of material which has been deposited. There is a component.
Right. A similar question came for Abhinavji from Colonel Manish Sharma, which was how is the gas that you are producing, the CNG, how is it sold commercially? I mean, can you sell it in the open market? Do you have to sell it to IGL stations, or can you sell it to like factories or people who are using this gas for industrial purposes?
Thank you, Ankit. I mean, as I told you, it's an energy. I mean, you don't need a rocket science actually to sell an energy, basically.
Hmm.
If you would have seen a CNG station, it's always overloaded. So you don't actually have to market your CNG gas. But for us, I'll tell you my aspect. We have actually gotten a contract with IGL, so they'll be procuring all the gas what we produce. So they'll be taking all those gases. We have gotten contract with IGL.
Very nice. Um, there is a fair interest in understanding, especially from you, Abhinav, when we set up such plants where water is in such a heavy usage. Do you run into problems of water discharge and affluent treatment from that angle? Because a lot of industry in Meerut is actually dealing with this water discharge and ETP plants and ATP plants. So do you get into those kind of problems, or are
The
you a
Okay, I'll tell because we haven't started it yet, but still I tell you what I know from my basic understanding. Because this project comes under the green category in term when we talk in terms of the permission from the pollution board. So this comes under the green category basically. So is not the water which comes out is it's basically a liquid fertilizer, and that is actually sellable. So discharging that liquid back, because we'll be recycling that water base, so there won't be too much of discharge actually involved in this project. But whatever little is there, we'll try to sell it, or we'll try to give it to the end customer, so that they can have a better yield, so they can have better returns out of their crops.
Okay. Sandeepji, there is a question that came up. Okay, you talked about every electronic gadget producer has certain targets of recycling. You mentioned that by 2030 they have to recycle about 70% of the products that they generate. Now, how are these targets actually measured? I mean, do you like count the devices that have come in for recycling, and you basically figure out कि भाई इतने iPhone बिके and इतने हमने iPhone collect करे recycling के लिए? Is that how this number is arrived at?
So these targets are set up as per the policy and regulations which have been made based on the basis of the sales what you have done in the past. So suppose you did a sales of $1 billion or say $500 million in a certain year. So your next target would be a certain percentage of that $1 billion or $500 million sales to be recycled actually. So they monitor in terms of those, and all these quantities and price both basis on that basis. So for example, 2015, you sold $500 million of devices. So you will be asked to say 20% recycle of that value in say 2020, for example. So that's how it is there. And it is monitored by the state pollution control boards, because every quarter, every 6 months, every year we submit a data that how much for which company, how much e-waste has been collected. And they then tabulate that data and come out with some reactions to this. And if there is no collection done or shortfall of collection is done, then the companies are penalized. And penalized to the extent of, as I mentioned, that Apple's imports were stopped for 3 months in last year, in 2019. So they can go to that extent of penalizing the organization if their targets are not being met.
Abhinav, a member has asked, for your purposes, how is the infrastructure to collect biomass? How has that been set up? I mean, for a digester of a fairly big size would require a lot of biomass, a lot of waste, cow dung, and things like that. So, would you be setting up this infrastructure, or are there players already that would, instead of dumping it in landfills, will bring the bio waste to your sites?
No, there are no existing players in it, first of all, and we are setting up this unit in Muzaffarnagar. So in a radius of around 10 kilometers, we've been surrounded by the sugar industries, which produces around 30% of the sugar which has been produced in the entire India. So there is a byproduct which comes out of from the production unit, that is nothing but a press mud that is easily and abundantly available. So I mean, for us, it shouldn't be too much of an hassle, I guess. And because there are too many restaurants over there, too many gaushalas are nearby, so collecting those wastes also, I mean, we have to set up an infra to collect all those things, yes. But that is available in a radius of around 10 kilometers.
One of our members, Shri Manish Jain ji, had a question, and this I think is primarily addressed to Sandeep ji. What is the process to set up a recycling plant for e-waste disposal or recycling? I think you'll have to, you're on mute.
So the process I can definitely share, but in a very informal manner or very briefly, I can say that you need to choose a location which is accessible to the collection and the aggregators easily. Like for example, we Karosambhav ourselves have a recycling plant in Ghaziabad, and why Ghaziabad? Because there is a good reach from the entire UP, Noida belt, for example, Delhi, for example, or the NCR per se. So one is the logistics point of view, number one. Number two, are there any incentives available for that recycler plant to be established by the state or the central government, for example? Are there any incentives being given to them? So proximity to the collection agents. Secondly, incentives from the state, and the right kind of people or infrastructure you can create in terms of nearest, I will say, the warehouses of these companies. These are some of the few parameters which we really want them to be aware of before establishing a recycling plant. Plus the equipment itself, the support from the pollution control boards if needed, for example, or any other consulting organizations to really ensure that your infrastructure is fully developed, your equipments, your capacities, your manpower is available around the proximity of that plant is important actually. Semi-skilled or skilled manpower in this domain would be good to have.
Right. Now actually in my mind there is one question. Do second-hand devices also come under this purview of recycling?
So second-hand devices, as I said, if you remember, I spoke about the refurbishers also being part of the domain. So refurbishers also are being given the targets to really adhere to it. Now, one thing is that when you call second-hand, one is that in a formal way it becomes second-hand, and the second is informal way, because suppose you are using a phone and you give it to your maid or driver, it carries the same target as it was original. Okay, because that device actually was manufactured in 2015. But suppose in between 2015 and 2020, it went to a refurbisher. Okay, and the device had major problems and it went to a refurbisher, and he did some process on the device and he sold it as good as new. I will not say he sold it as new, but as good as new, as equal to a new. So then that target gets upon to the refurbisher. So there is a whole system which is established to track these kind of devices as well. If they are being refurbished, then the target gets transferred from, this is probably, I think the law, but I can cross check it again, but the target gets transferred onto the refurbisher rather than the original producer, because he did some extra act to make it working again and give it to the market or supply in the market at some price, which may not be as good as a new price, but maybe 50% or 40% of the new price. So then that formally registered refurbisher has to carry that mandate and the target becomes theirs.
So, I mean, what I'm hearing it is actually done at a device level, like from a, if 100 iPhones were manufactured, you kind of have to track all those 100 iPhones through the life cycle. Is that?
So certainly if suppose that that phone was out of the system, it reached its end cycle and somebody has produced it or reproduced it, for example. then in their system it dies. So one has to really follow that domain, that where the actual device has gone. So it becomes sometimes tedious process to be counted. But since it's a percentage of certain sales, so it's not so necessary that X number of device has to be followed, but they have to give that volume.
Abhinavji, there is a question, and actually in my mind also there was this question. What is the difference between like a small biogas domestic plant that people have and what you are setting up? Is it just the volume, or is there some quality or quantitative difference between I mean, does the size make it a different entity altogether, or are actually they the same thing?
As I told you earlier, see the biogas plant, the small biogas plant doesn't have a purification unit in it. So that the biogas is combustible, but that doesn't have the same calorific value as you attained after the purification of the gas, and that can be used for the industrial and for the vehicular purposes. After only the enrichment of the gas, you can use those things. The purification is like, you can say, a heart of the system.
Very nice. Actually, I have a few more questions. If anyone of our audience has any other questions, do please send them on chat to me. Uh, Sandeep ji, the e-waste that is recycled, you mentioned a couple of things like gold, copper, and things. Are there other elements that are recovered from this? I mean, is plastic also recovered, or?
So plastic generally doesn't get recovered. It gets its own natural process to eliminate that. I don't think plastic is recovered out there, but mostly are rare earth materials or valuable materials, as I mentioned in my presentation. These are the ones which are recovered and recycled to the manufacturers of those components, for example. So there is a lot of material which will come out of the printed circuit board. So this is used ultimately as a raw material, as an input to why the PCB is being manufactured originally. So it goes back to that system. But it is not tracked that कि Apple की device का जो recovered material है वो Apple को ही जाएगा. It can go to Samsung, or Samsung का recovered material can go to Lenovo, for example, or Vivo, for example. But the quantities are defined. The material could be moving from one to another, basically.
Do you see that lead acid batteries would come into the system again?
So I think there is already a policy being worked out. Few other components which are being brought under this waste policy, like one is batteries, second is for tires, and third is for mattresses. So these are the other three, apart from plastics, which has already happened. But these are the other three elements which definitely will come into the purview of waste management guidelines, because these are very toxic in nature and they really contribute negatively to the environment. And you would have seen burning of tires in winters, and for that reason, any other place. So there will be a formal disposal ecosystem being established for tires, mattresses, and batteries.
What is so special about mattresses? I mean, are we talking about like foam mattresses, or?
So there is a lot of synthetic material into it, which is toxic for the environment. So definitely they fall into that category. So it will be, so plastics is covered. So once you cover plastics, a huge variety already. Bottles, containers, glass, tumblers, this, that, all is covered. But tires you cover is different. But mattresses has a different composition of the raw material into it, which is not so positive for the environment. So that is why they are covering mattresses as a different category.
A question came from our President Gaurav Jain ji. Is there any effort towards increasing the end of life time of these electronic devices? I mean, are there mandates that, oh, your phone has to last long for about 5 years, or the battery on this phone has to last for about 2 years, or something like that?
If you ask me, the sales company will be interested in a shorter cycle. People will never say, use my phone for 10 years, फिर वो बेचेगा कैसे? I don't think anybody is doing that to make it longer, but people tend to use it longer than specified. So it is informally being used, but I don't see any system which will say use it longer.
Right.
Tough call.
We have a live question from Ankur Jaggi. Please, Ankur, go ahead.
My question is to Abhinav. So Abhinav, I just saw that there are huge sized digesters and falling pits in your style of plant. So lot of opportunities that come across people is to set up these plants at the client base. So in such an option, how do you treat the maintenance part of this? Is it like very tough, or are there any fixed procedures of maintenance, or is it possible to have a scheduled maintenance of digesters?
I mean, see, our plant will be running for approximately 336 days in a year. So there are a couple of, I mean, there are some, when there are electronic equipments inside, electrical equipments are there inside the digester. There are 7, 8, 18 kilowatt submersible motors in it. So wear and tear will definitely be there. Sometimes wear and tear of a gas membrane can also be there. So yes, there has to be a scheduled maintenance also for this.
And how do you rate the life of those non-permissible membranes? Is it a regular process?
No, it's. I mean, the company claims it to be 20 to 22 years. From
Okay.
20 to 22 years, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
With that, I come to the last question, and this is addressed to both of you, Abhinav and Deepti. How can we, as a Merit Management Association or a group of enlightened individuals, can help both of you to save our planet? Is there some initiative that we can be a part of, or how can we contribute?
Can I take it first, Abhinav?
Yeah, please carry on.
Okay. So definitely MMA can play a very important role, I will say, because of your location, geographical location. That area is well known for the e-waste being dismantled badly and treated badly. Muzaffarnagar is the key area, if I can point it out. If you can reach out to those people and bring them to the formal sector, I think you will do much greater a job than anything else. Because they are not only in that area, but they are spread across the country. For example, everywhere the kabadiwala business or the raddiwala business is being controlled by them. It's a mafia which controls this business, and they are not interested in any kind of a formal sector. They want cash, rokda, money by any hook or by crook. They don't understand targets. They don't understand all this toxic elements being there and recovery. They want to recover their own way. They want to treat this as their own way. So if as a formal structure, we can bring that kind of awareness, some programs, some interactive sessions with the community there, it can be highly risky also. But if in some fashion manner, we can bring in some educational reforms, some knowledge reforms over there, that how it can really help to boost their living, class of living, and boost their economy. I think that will be great contribution from you as individuals, as well as an association, which is in and around that area where we are targeting such kind of things happening already. So
Do you have a collection center in Meerut of Karo Sabha?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I don't have the number, but definitely there is.
I mean, he's asking, do you have a center in Meerut?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
I can send you the address to
Sure.
to the association.
Sure, if you can, we'll circulate it and
I'll do that.
please, yeah.
I'll do
How about you, Abhinav? How can we as an association?
In my case, it would be like to educate, because it's a farming, it's an agricultural belt where we are situated. So if we educate the customers, if we educate the farmers in terms of using the organic fertilizer rather than using urea and the other unorganic fertilizers or unorganic materials for the soil, so that will be really beneficial, I guess, that for the entire generation to come, and for our health perspective also. I mean, to educate the customer, to educate the farmer, so that they use more and more of an organic fertilizer to enrich their soil. It may take a little longer, but it will definitely yield good results. I mean, I would like if the contribution can come from your side.
Well, we wish you the best of luck on this project, and Sandeepji, we also wish you the best of future to grow and help our planet. Those are all the questions we had for the panel discussion. So I would formally hand over the proceedings back to Ankur. Ankur, please take this over. Thank you.
Thank you, Ankit. Thank you, Sandeep ji. Thank you, Abhinav, for answering all our questions.
Welcome.
With this, we come to the end of our day 2 and the 33rd annual convention. The proceedings of the convention would be incomplete without the vote of thanks. It is a pleasure for me to get this opportunity to thank people who have been with us for 2 days, who have made this event possible. To begin with, I would like to thank all the 4 distinguished guests, the speakers that we had, Mr. Satish Sinha, who spoke on the biomedical waste, Mr. Pavan Pushkarna, who spoke on industrial wastewater and its recycle and reuse, Mr. Sandeep Bhargav on e-waste, and Mr. Abhinav Rastogi on generating biogas from industrial waste. It is indeed very motivational aspect that the people of this country, the citizen of India, is now getting aware about how, by using various technologies, how Mother Earth can be saved, and how things, various aspects of industrial use and waste can be recycled and put back to use instead of wasting them. So thank you, all of you, for sharing your views with us on various new subjects. I would also like to thank the team MMA, the office bearers, the council members, the advisory board, the invitees, and our members for being a part of this event and making it successful. Yesterday, for those who were not present, we had launched the Endeavor, that is the annual souvenir of MMA that we print every year in hard copies, which would be circulated soon by courier. And we would also be launching, we have actually already launched this magazine yesterday on digital platform, that is the YouTube channel. And also we would send the links on email and WhatsApp for you to have a flip copy view of the magazine. For the launch of Endeavor, I would like to thank the editorial team headed by Mr. Nishan Jain, Joint Secretary, Merit Management Association, and thoroughly supported by Mr. Aman Dayal for making the flip copy possible for us, and Master Pranav Jain, who is responsible for managing our YouTube channel. And during the beginning of the session, the souvenir that was being played on the YouTube was managed by Pranav. Next, I would like to thank Mr. Ankit Singhal, former President, Merit Management Association, and Mr. Vibhor Agarwal, immediate former President, Merit Management Association, for handling the panel discussion today and yesterday, respectively. We would also like to thank Multimax Engineering Works Private Limited for offering their space to us to set up the control room. The base of the this Zoom meeting was set up at the Multimax. The office bearers and all of us are handling the show from here. So a big round of applause and thanks to Mr. Vibhor Agarwal from Multimax Engineering. My heart wouldn't be complete without thanking the back area office, the secretariat, the staff of Merit Management Association. Without their support and hard work, this event wouldn't have been possible. With this, I would now request President Mr. Gaurav Jain to please take it forward from here. Over to you, Gaurav. Thank you.
Thank you once again, everyone, for joining, and thank you, Ankur, for putting this wonderful event and taking care of all the in and outs of the event. Am I audible?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Every event cannot be possible without the support of the sponsors, right? And we are always happy to have them by our side. And we would like to thank our sponsors. So first, I would like to say a big heartfelt thank to Sunsphere Greenland for supporting this event. So I would request our convention chairman, Mr. Siddharth Singhal, to present a token of appreciation to Sunsphere Greenland. Siddharth.
Thank you, Gaurav. Thank you, SG, for all the lovely support that we have always had from you. Unfortunately, we couldn't have you this time. Puneet Bhaiya is there, he's waving his hand. Thank you, Bhaiya. Thank you for all the support, material and otherwise. The morale, you have never let us down. So, of course, this will reach you, but then this is the digital presentation of the memento that we have had to learn through this year. Thank you for everything.
Thank you once again, St. Peter's Greenland Group. Along with it, we would like to thank Nelco India Private Limited. So I request Convention Co-Chairman Mr. Samir Goel to present.
Thank you, Nelco India. And thank you, Kamalanand ji, for your never-ending support to MMA. Thank you so much.
Along with it, I would also like to thank you, AT Group. So I request Mr. Ankit Singhal, former President, MMA, to present a token.
Thank you, Anand Track and Field. They have been a very big sponsor, very good sponsor for us.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Anand, the Track and Field, for helping us out and making this possible.
Along with this, there's one more group that has supported us in terms of technology, in terms of everything. We need them in any hour. So great thanks to Dayal Group as well. So I request our immediate former president, Mr. Vibhor Agarwal, to present a token to Dayal Group.
Thank you, Abhayji, and thank you, Aman. Thank you to the entire Dayal Group for their continued support. You have been a pillar of strength for Merit Management Association, and we look forward to continued support from you. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Along with this, I would also like to thank Saru Group. Saru Group is also our strongest pillar of MMA because MMA was born with the help of Saru Group. So we cannot forget them at all. And Saru Group is always kind enough to support MMA and anytime we need them. So once again, a heartfelt thank to the entire Saru Group. And I request Dr. Devendra Arora to present a token of appreciation to Saru Group. Dr. Dev.
Yes, thank you very much to all contribution of Merit Management Association and entire team of the Saru Smelting from Merit. So once again, the core of heart from entire
So with this, I will request Ankur to please take over the session once again.
With this, we come to the end of our 33rd annual convention. We once again thank each one of you on behalf of Merit Management Association to spare your time with us, your valuable time with us, and being with us for the Sunday morning. Thanking you, everybody.
Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thanks for having me, sir.
Support. We are happy to have you with us on this day. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you and a wonderful program. Congratulations.
Thank you everyone.
Good job done. Really a good job done by everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.